other similar proceedings with respect to wind turbine cases?
Yes, Your Honor, and those are identified in one of the attachments to my testimony.
And have you testified in any proceedings before this board?
Yes, twice, 2 Buckeye projects.
Ms. Zafari, were you going to point us to the attachment?
Buckeye wanted to. Yes.
Okay, at this point in time, I'm going to deny the motions to strike, and Mr. Van Clay, you're certainly free to cross-examine the witness.
Mr. Mundt, you're not a medical doctor, correct?
That's correct. My doctorate, as is my master's degree, are in epidemiology.
And you do not have a medical degree, correct?
Objection, asked and answered.
I have a PhD and an MS in epidemiology.
You have no training in acoustics?
I have no formal training in acoustics.
You're not an acoustic engineer?
That's correct.
You're not an engineer of any sort?
That's correct.
With regard to your testimony, pages 16 and 17, if you would turn to those pages, I have some questions about them. Let's talk about Table 1 and Answer 32 on page 16 of your testimony. Table 1 has some example sound comparisons, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, for example, it is stated in Table 1 that a forced hot air heating system has a sound pressure level in dBA ranging between 42 and 52 dBA, correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
Okay. Now, you're not expressing an expert opinion that 42 to 52 dBA is the actual sound pressure level for the forced hot air heating system, are you? You're not expressing an expert opinion in that regard?
That's correct. I'm not providing any opinions on these sound measures. I'm not an expert in sound measurement.
Okay. So the same would be true with regard to all of the example sound comparisons in Table 1?
I'm not challenging them.
Well, you're not challenging, but you're not also not expressing an expert opinion that these sound pressure levels are accurate as set forth in Table 1, are you?
I think that's consistent with not challenging them.
Well, I'm asking you whether you're saying they are accurate.
I see. I'm not either way. I'm representing that these are commonly found published ranges into which I've placed the line with respect to the wind farm.
Okay. And with regard to Table 2 on page 17 of your testimony, again, we have some examples of types of sound and decibel levels associated with each of those types of sound. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's a very similar table, this one from the NIH.
And with respect to the information in Table 2, you are not expressing an expert opinion that any of the information in Table 2 is accurate?
I would say I take it as accurate from government website, the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders. I'm not technically challenging the decibel level ranges that are presented here.
And you're not expressing an expert opinion that the decibel level ranges in Table 2 are accurate either, correct?
That's correct. I present this table as I did Table 1 as background to understand what roughly the range of sounds we're talking about with respect to wind farms.
Have you ever interviewed a person who was alleged, or have you ever interviewed a person who alleged that he or she was suffering illness from exposure to wind turbine noise?
No.
Over the course of your career, approximately how many cases have you testified in?
Can you be more specific?
Well, I'm not sure how I could be, but let me try.
What type of case?
Well,
What type of court?
lawsuits or administrative hearings?
With respect to any alleged exposure and any alleged outcome?
Yes.
Dozens, I don't know the number. In most of them in deposition. I've only testified before live proceedings probably 15 times.
Do you regularly provide expert opinions to clients with regard to epidemiology issues?
It's vague. Can you make it more precise or restate it?
Well, I assume that you have other duties or other business activities besides testifying in court, that you also assist clients with regard to epidemiology issues. Is that accurate?
Yes, I perform a wide range of epidemiological services.
Mm-hmm. And in the course of those services, do you provide the clients with expert opinions on the relationship between potential causes and health effects?
I do, specific to litigation, where that seems to be the question or request, is whether or not, in my expert opinion, some exposure or risk factor can and has caused an individual's or group of people's health problems. Outside of litigation, I do a lot of scientific research, critical reviews, synthesis of the evidence, publication, and communication of the science, in which there's no real opinions involved.
Okay. How many epidemiological opinions would you estimate you have prepared over the course of your career?
It's not possible to enumerate. My opinions across several matters, including those pertaining to wind turbines, is the same opinion. So I don't know whether you're talking about episodes of opinions or the absolute number of opinions. I would say this is maybe my 15th time expressing my opinion on wind turbines in such a setting.
I was referring to the number of times that you have expressed epidemiological opinions as opposed to trying to break it down by type. Can you give me an estimate?
As opposed to conducting primary science and publication and scholarship, those activities.
Yeah.
I would say there's a strong concordance with a number of times I've testified. In fact, I wouldn't testify if I didn't have a scientific opinion in a litigation matter.
In any of the cases in which you've testified, have you expressed an opinion that a particular source or a particular factor had or did cause a health effect?
But again, it's very vague and broad. I would say in most of my litigation work, the agents are either actual exposures or alleged exposures that can, in fact, under some circumstances, cause harm. I would say the question becomes, more importantly, at what levels does harm occur?
In any of those cases, have you, well, let me back up. In all of those cases, have you testified on behalf of the client who was accused of being responsible for agents that resulted in the exposures that resulted in the alleged health problems?
Not exclusively, but primarily, yes.
What percentage of the time, approximately, have you represented the persons who are being accused?
Well, first of all, I think you may have misstated. I don't think there's any situations in which there were persons accused. I would say rather there are entities, usually corporations, that are allegedly responsible for some exposure. And I would add some alleged exposure because sometimes there is no such exposure. So fortunately, this is what happens in some of the litigation I'm involved with, is to help the court understand whether or not exposure might have occurred, and if it did, at a level consistent with inducing harm based on epidemiological evidence.
Okay, so to rephrase my question then, for approximately what percentage of the cases in which you've testified, have you testified on behalf of the company that has been accused of the exposures alleged to cause the health effects?
Thank you. It's a large majority, more than 90%.
Have you ever expressed or have you ever testified to an opinion related to the relationship between agents and alleged health effects, in which later, in retrospect, you believed were inaccurate?
I'm going to object to the relevance of that line of questioning.
Well, it's entirely irrelevant because he's expressing an opinion here, and I want to know whether just because he expresses an opinion, whether every time he believes he's right, or whether sometimes epidemiological opinions are proved later to be inaccurate.
I'll allow the question.
Shall I answer the last question?
Yes.
I understand part, I think, what you're saying. Science evolves, and in testimony, I'm under oath to present the court with the truth as I see it. That's the scientific truth. Does that mean that tomorrow there might be a raft of new studies with improved methodologies that modify the body of evidence on a particular topic? Of course not. It happens. So therefore, though I testify repeatedly in related matters, each and every time I do so, I re-evaluate the literature and update it and see whether anything in the last time since I testified on a particular topic, there is something published that would meaningfully change my opinions. As to the first part of your question, I don't recall any situation where I came to a contrary conclusion after having testified to something earlier, unless it reflects the evolution of the science that I review on an ongoing basis.
Well, in that regard, in the past, you have testified on behalf of tobacco companies with respect to whether or not their tobacco products caused health effects. Is that correct?
I'm going to object again, Your Honor. We're here to talk about wind turbines. I don't know why we're talking about tobacco.
Because it shows, depending on how he answers this question, it shows that epidemiology can be an uncertain science. And just because he's expressing an opinion about the relationship between wind turbine noise and health effects doesn't necessarily mean it is so. There is always some uncertainty about whether or not an epidemiological opinion is accurate or is later proven to be inaccurate.
And again, Dr. Mundt himself just said each time he goes to give an opinion, he updates the literature, looks through whatever developments have been made in the science, and is testifying as the most current present knowledge. Again, tobacco studies from the 70s or wherever we're headed, I'm just failing to see the relevance.
Well, it also has a relevance to the witness's credibility. The witness has just stated that he can't recall issuing any opinions in a legal case that have been later proven to be wrong. And so I'm exploring that statement because I think that perhaps he has expressed some opinions that have turned out to be inaccurate.
I will allow limited scope of that additional line of questioning.
I do, thank you, I do appreciate your acknowledgement that there are uncertainties surrounding epidemiological research and science. I would add that that's the best we have in determining what causes disease. There is no proof. We cannot prove disease causation, with the exception maybe of something so obvious as a gunshot injury that leads to some perhaps even death. Doesn't need an epidemiologist to study that situation. But with complex chronic diseases, common diseases, with millions of risk factors and exposures, there is no other science that can deliver an objective scientific methodologic approach to determining causation than epidemiology, with its warts and its uncertainties. But that's why we have confidence intervals. That's why we evaluate the totality of the evidence and not pick one or another piece of evidence. And we make an educated and reasonable causal conclusion that can never be proven, but is the best that we have at any point in time.
All right, well, that's a helpful statement, but we need to go back to my question, which is, have you in the past expressed epidemiological opinions on behalf of tobacco companies in which you opined that their tobacco products did not cause health effects?
I honestly can't imagine that, because tobacco products have been known before I was even schooled to be harmful to human health. So I cannot imagine. And I think you, generally and quite broadly, misrepresent the kinds of testimony that I have provided in tobacco litigation, which is pretty technical, and I must say, perhaps one of the few, if any, only epidemiologist that has, on behalf of tobacco clients, testified that cigarette smoking causes some 20-something cancers.
Have there been any instances in which you have expressed opinions that your clients' tobacco products did not cause the health effects that they were being accused of causing?
I think there was one matter in which I was asked to evaluate epidemiologically whether a specific type of lung cancer was associated with smoking. By the way, the 4 major categories of lung cancer clearly are. This was a very rare BAC, bronchoalveolar carcinoma, where I believe the epidemiological literature was not clear that it was causally associated with cigarette smoking.
And with the passage of time, do you hold to the same opinion today?
Which one?
Again, Your Honor,
The
I'm
one
gonna
that
have
you
to
just
object
mentioned.
on the grounds of relevance. I mean, we're discussing cigarette smoke, and I don't know how long ago this took place.
Well, this is my last question, provided that he answers it. I simply want to know whether he has since rendering that testimony, discovered that based on the passage of time and advanced scientific knowledge that his opinion was inaccurate. Goes to his credibility.
I'll allow the question.
Well, again, I would be scientifically remiss if I didn't update my research on that topic, because since that was a relatively rare cancer, I've had not had the opportunity to look at it any time in the last 20 years. So there's a good chance that there is more evidence, and I'm not going to speculate as to what it would say.
Okay, Mr. Van Clay, at this point, I
I'll
would recommend that you
finish
start to get back into the subject matter that we're here for today.
Yeah, as I indicated, that was my last question on that line of questioning. In each of the cases, that is lawsuits or administrative hearings, in which you've rendered an epidemiological opinion, has there been another epidemiologist who has expressed a contrary opinion?
With respect to wind turbines,
No, with respect to his opinions on issue in those cases.
Well, thank you for clarifying, because I'd be hard-pressed to find a colleague that would have particularly different opinions from mine on the epidemiology in this type of matter.
Okay,
yes.
Your Honor, I would move to strike that as being non-responsive.
There was an answer to your question before it was clarified.
Well,
Okay.
no, it wasn't.
Hold on.
It wasn't.
I'm going to grant the motion to strike, and please ask the question again.
Okay. In those lawsuits or administrative hearings in which you have expressed an epidemiological opinion, has there been an opposing expert in epidemiology who has expressed an opposing opinion?
Yes, and in particular in the litigation matters, where my understanding is, say, in toxic tort litigation, it is the plaintiff's responsibility to make a case for an association, which is then representing defendants. My responsibility to validate whether this aligns with the scientific evidence or not, and if it does not, then I testify to that effect.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I would like to have a pre-marked LR Exhibit 6 placed before the witness. I believe that the court reporter's table will find that. I can approach the witness to provide that document if you wish.
You may approach.
Yeah, this is the Night Noise Guidelines for Europe, 2009. I've handed you what has been marked as LR Exhibit number 6, which is entitled Night Noise Guidelines for Europe. And you'll see that the date on this publication is 2009. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes.
This is a report by the World Health Organization, correct?
It's published by the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization is a large entity. I imagine it's produced by, or represented to be produced by staff of WHO or contractors to WHO.
Mm-hmm. To your knowledge, does the WHO utilize the services of experts to put together reports of this nature?
Yes, and if you note Roman numeral page 8, there are dozens of contributors to this volume.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at the executive summary for this document. And specifically, I would like to refer you to Roman numeral 12. Just tell me when you found that page.
Thresholds for observed effects.
No, I'm in the executive summary, Roman numeral 12.
It's the page before that one.
Thank you. I
Vulnerable groups.
misread the Roman numeral.
All right, referring you to the third paragraph, which is also the first bullet point on that page, there's a statement as follows. Sleep is a biological necessity, and disturbed sleep is associated with a number of adverse impacts on health. You see that?
Yes.
Do you agree with that statement?
I have no reason to disagree with that statement.
Now let's go to the next page of the executive summary, which is page Roman numeral 13. This page is entitled Thresholds for Observed Effects. And you'll see a table in the middle of that page, correct?
Yes.
And that table spills over into the next page of the document as well, correct?
Yes.
This is table. Okay, so with regard to the information in this table, do you see where there's a line that states waking up in the night and/or too early in the morning? You see that?
I see, yes, in the second column about the fifth entry.
Okay. And you'll see that the threshold for that effect is stated to be 42 decibels.
Yes, that's what it says.
Okay. And then under that, there's an entry that says prolongation of the sleep inception period, difficulty getting to sleep. You see that?
I do.
And the threshold for that is also 42 decibels.
Don't know, there's an asterisk, and I don't understand the statement
Okay.
associated with the asterisk.
Right. A couple of entries below that, you'll see an entry for increased average motility when sleeping. You see that?
I do.
Do you know what motility is?
I do.
What is it?
Movement.
And the threshold for that is stated to be 42 decibels.
Yes, that's what it says.
Under that, we have an entry for self-reported sleep disturbance. You see that?
I do.
And the decibel threshold for that is stated to be 42.
That's what it says, yes.
Under that, we have use of somnolent drugs and sedatives. And the threshold for that is stated to be 40 decibels, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
And under that, we have an entry for environmental insomnia. And the decibel level, or the decibel threshold for that is stated to be 42 decibels.
That's
See
what
that?
it says, yes.
If you go to the next page, do you see an entry for complaints? About halfway down the table on that page.
Yes.
Okay. And you see that the estimated threshold for that is 35 decibels.
Yes, that's what it says.